My name is Paul Williamson. I'm the chair of the PRCA Creative Marketing Council, and I'll be chairing this session. I'm delighted today to be joined by our new fellow members of the Creative Marketing Council. Kat is an associate director at Franklin Ray, a PR agency. Nick Lovett is MD of M3. Ayẹni is the founder and CEO of BlackHouse Media, and we also have somebody from client side, David, who's the Director of Communications at Salisbury Group. We all recognise that COVID has created a catalyst for seismic shifts in behaviours, ways of working, relationships, and how marcoms is delivered and consumed. It has, of course, presented lots of challenges, but there have also been a number of opportunities. And with that in mind, we're going to sort of split the discussion into three key topics this afternoon. The first one being the business world in which we now live, the ways we will communicate going forward, and finally we're going to do a little bit of a room 101 and find out what things we would like to consign to marketing room 101. As always, I'm at pains to point out that this is your session. This isn't about us, so please do send any questions for the panel, and we will do all we can to address them. Just so you're aware, this will be recorded and will be posted on the PRCA site in the coming days. And we're also going to write a little blog with the key findings from the session as well. So we'll send that out to you and you'll be able to share that with any colleagues that weren't able to make it today. One final request from me, this is your group and we're really keen for you to give us what it is you want to hear or see from us in the next event. You never know, we may even have a beer together. So please do drop me an email at paul.williamson@realia.co with any ideas, thoughts that you have on the next session. Okay, so we'll start with the first topic, I think, which is the business world we now live in. And I just want to invite the panelists to talk a little bit about what changes they've seen over the course of the last year and what changes they've seen in their businesses too. So why don't we start with you, David?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. I suppose for us, big changes really in the past year. Internally having to furlough some staff, having a lot of staff working from home. Whereas at the same time, we've got people inside the business who couldn't work from home, who needed to go to site to perform their activities. For example, we've got people in our business who provide engineering, maintenance services, security, cleaning, those type of sort of frontline hero type of work, which has been quite important, really. So from the communication side, it's been, I suppose, a bit of a challenge in trying to keep them engaged, where we can't go to the office and see them in person and hear about what's going on. But on the other side of things, I suppose we've adapted quite well as an organization. We invested quite a lot in our digital marketing capabilities last year. We actually relaunched the Salisbury Group brand last summer. I wanted to do it in April, but then the pandemic hit and I thought, this is not the time to relaunch brand. Yeah. I've got to wait. But it got to the point, the precipice point where I thought, well, I've got to launch it at some point. So we ended up doing it on the 1st of July. And it was actually quite an opportune time. There wasn't a lot happening in our industry. We got a lot of good coverage from it. And we were able to sort of invest quite a bit in our digital marketing activities, which help our coverage and our brand awareness. So it was a really sort of interesting time of change. Some things that we lost in terms of the culture and the people-based activities, but on the digital side, we definitely gained things, and we'll be taking those forward, hopefully, as a business.
Super. We're certainly going to come back to the culture and welfare of people. I think that's a real consideration for everybody going forward, and how that sort of shapes out in the coming months. Ayẹni, I just wanted to turn to you. I'm very mindful that in the UK we are comparatively fortunate that certainly the elder statesmen such as myself will, if we haven't had our first jab, we'll be getting it quite soon, and therefore we're feeling a little bit safe. But of course your organisation spans the globe, and I suppose you've faced some very different challenges.
Yeah, so thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. So so I was going to say the two critical things that we've picked from the past year is courage to be able to do all the things we should have done many years before now that we thought that we were given excuses to not do. Working remotely, collaborating, allowing staff to work flexibly, and you know how we work with clients and all of that. That's one. Then two, the way the consumers of today expect organizations to relate with them, to believe in what they believe in, and all of that. You know, so I think for me, those are two critical lessons I picked up, and I'm like, and I see people living now, almost everybody waiting for COVID to be over. So almost like they are now ready to live the life they've always been afraid to live. But then, so yes, we have operations in the UK and we have operations across Africa, as principally in Nigeria, where the vaccines are not that much here yet, and you know, so I see the UK, Europe, and America getting ready to have a great summer, and I look at places like Nigeria and other parts of West Africa where people still have to wait for such a long time. In Nigeria, as an example, the vaccine doses that came were not even up to cover 10% of the population, and now they've had to stop vaccination so that they don't give everybody the first dose, and then they won't be able to give them the second dose. You know, so the challenges in places like, say, Africa is not just trying to contemplate how to live and how to work post-COVID. Is also to be able to be in a place where they can even get vaccinated. That's one. Also get a new job or keep a job. We've been fortunate across our organization. COVID brought PR more to relevance with the leadership of our clients, because we work for blue chip companies who had to show commitment to helping the countries and navigate COVID. So in doing that, that period brought more relevance to what we did. So it was very important year for us. And all the clients that we've worked for were involved in supporting the government, getting PPEs, supporting frontline workers. One particular client actually partnered with the African Union to bring in vaccines and all of that. And you know, so what we are dealing with is moving forward, very fascinating new ways of working and collaborating, but also knowing that the realities of those who live on the ground in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Kenya is different from the realities of those who live in
excuse me.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think the point you make about being courageous is an absolutely valid one for anyone working in our sector. Speaking of courage, I'm going to turn to Kat, who runs an agency that you know, a lot of its clients are in out of home cinema type organisations, which of course has been sort of catastrophically hit over the course of the last year. How's life been for you?
Well, it's been a wild ride, I think, for everyone. I think picking up on what our previous two colleagues on this call have talked about, it's very difficult to kind of unilaterally say it's been like this. I can say our client base have been quite flexible. So actually, because we do work with some cinemas, some of them have pivoted to doing drive-ins and been able to service people's needs that way. And cinema is one of those. It's like the theatre. It's one of those industries that it's quite symptomatic that everyone's really emotionally attached to it. It's one of those entertainment kind of, you know, pastimes that people are really desperate to get back to. So we've been able to tap into those currents, I think, with people. It's not as easy as just saying people have just pivoted straight to going straight on Netflix. There's that real demand actually to get back into that shared space. And share the experience with other people. And I think we're seeing that across, because we also work with a lot of marcoms agencies as well, are actually our clients. So we understand that the events industry, for example, has been hit so hard. I mean, it goes without saying, but there's that building demand, I think, with an awful lot of people just thinking, I want to be back among other people. I want to be back, you know, in a controlled way, you know, next to other people, to have a collective experience. And I think this summer it's going to be a balance for me in those kinds of shared spaces of the people who are just desperate to get back to it and want to get back to their festivals and just they've really missed it and they're really passionate about it, versus those that just need, they're a bit more reticent.
Absolutely.
You know, they just need a little bit more trust, a little bit more, okay, what are you going to do for me? Don't get too close.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think there's going to be a balance there. I don't think you can necessarily say everyone's just going to be straight back out, you know, aside from the pub's experience in the last couple of weekends.
Yeah, yeah. No, I certainly, I for one, can't wait to have popcorn thrown at me by some sultry 13-year-old. I've missed that enormously. Nick, I'm gonna move on a little bit, because I know this is a subject absolutely sort of close to your heart, and we talked about this in the preparation call about well-being and welfare, not just for your people but for yourself as well. And I just wonder if you wanted to sort of share some of your reflections and thoughts on that.
Certainly. Hello, everybody. I think what we're finding with our workforce is you've got half of them clamoring to get back through the doors for some social engagement, and they definitely seem to be the ones who've had a jab or 2 jabs at the senior end of the market, and they are absolutely all over each other with elation. It's almost like throwing off the bonds of slavery at the moment with them. And then we've got the younger generation who the science says to you that they're not at risk in the same way as the older generation, but they have become very, very institutionalized in their little bubbles with either their housemates in rented accommodation or at home with their parents, etc. And for them, because it's almost an element of their lives are so much shorter at the moment, their experiences are so much shorter. This is a life-changing event for them, and a lifestyle change for them. So I've got, guys in their 20s who are very, very nervous of coming back into the office, not necessarily for their own health, but because of their parents they still live with and rent with, etc. The lateral flow tests work fantastically well. That is the biggest tick in the box I've seen through all of this, because they are comfortable coming in the night after they've had a lateral flow test and knowing that within their bubble of 10, 12 colleagues, everybody sitting in that room is clean and COVID-free at that point. But shared spaces, communal areas, public transport at rush hour, these are big no-nos, and I can't see that changing in the short to medium term with them. So we're having to flex around, don't use public transport. Don't come in at rush hour if you don't want to. Put the extra hour in, work from home if you want to at the end of the day. And we are now issuing these work from home credits. I know I had a chat with Kat a couple of days back, and they were talking about this 2 and 3 thing might be the way forward, 2 days from home, 3 days in the office. We struggle with that with a lot of the clients that we do. We need to collaborate and do the creative bit around the table, bounce ideas off each other. Leaving someone working in a silo, they think they're doing a brilliant job, bringing back the mind. It's like on a ride by 2 or 3 degrees, and you get something burnt lasagna like. So it's incredibly tricky. So we've explored now, and we've just released it today. We're giving our colleagues work from home credits that they can use.
Okay.
Their line managers, and there's a bank of those which they book in the usual way as they would do holidays and things. But it's not a Mondays and Fridays I'm not in the office.
Yeah. Just, I mean, certainly, I was really fearful of certainly the creative collaboration piece, because, in my humble opinion, you can always tell people who work on their own and think on their own, in terms of the quality of the output. But I was genuinely worried about the culture and how that might sort of start to dissipate, as we're all working remotely. But interestingly, certainly in my experience anyway, I think we're all a little bit closer now, because I know what everybody's bedroom looks like, and there's a bit of we're all in this together, and I think certainly that's something that we've experienced here. I think actually, bizarrely, everyone's a little bit closer as a result of being further apart, which is a really sort of strange sense. And I think the same for clients. Actually, I think most of our clients feel a little bit closer to us as well. I want to turn to David just on the point of well-being, because his organisation has a lot of remote workers by default, and they have to go on site and they have to service client businesses. we're quite lucky in sort of certainly on the agency side, you know, we all sit in chaise lounges and drink gin and tonic all day. But for you guys who actually do a proper job, have you managed to maintain the well-being of people that are potentially at risk by going into other places?
Yeah, it was. I think that initial period in the UK, sort of end of March through to May, maybe, when government guidance was coming out by the day. You know, we were all watching those press conferences, and industry organisations that support us, for example, were giving guidance on specific things. New cleaning regimes were coming out, workplace safety measures. You know, so we were constantly adapting, almost on a daily basis. You know, jumping on our gold committee calls and then trying to make sure it goes down the business, and you know, we take action on the key points. Really quite a challenge, really. But one of the great things about it was that our people who we really needed to keep going to site because they still had a job and they're important, almost all of them were able to keep going. You know, they wanted to keep working. They're really proud of what they do. They love that sense of working in partnership with clients. You know, we have customers in the financial sector, in the governmental sector, in all sorts of essential services. Those people could not work from home, at least couldn't work from home all week. It's fair to say offices were reduced capacity. Some buildings were mothballed and shut down, and we helped to do those things. But actually our people who kept going to site did a great job. So all we were trying to do was just trying to support them as much as possible and to try and keep them safe, really.
Did you find, because one of the challenges that some of our clients perceived to be a problem going forward was the people who had retained their jobs throughout all of this were probably a little bit tired and a little bit stressed and really, really stretched. And so they had a different set of kind of wellness and motivation challenges to people who were returning from furlough, who were struggling because they were only earning 80% of what they were earning. So they had a different set of challenges. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we did surveys of our staff, including, you know, reaching out to people who are on furlough just to get a pulse of how they're feeling, really. You know, we issued a well-being newsletter with some tips. We did some quizzes for a while, internal all that type of stuff. You know, just to keep people engaged, really. Yeah. But it was a massive stakeholder engagement process, trying to work out how everyone was feeling in different parts of the UK. I mean, I'm kind of lucky in that our organisation is just UK. So within that country, there was, of course, 4 different territories, all of which had different rules. You know, I'm sure some of the people on this call, you had people in other sorts of countries that you had to adapt to as well. So that sort of stakeholder engagement skills that we have in the Marcoms world, I think was quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how sometimes how poorly people who have communication as a profession are at communicating, particularly internally, right? So yeah, I can absolutely see that. Kat, by the way, for everybody who's attending, we're going to be gentle on Kat today because she had her jab yesterday. So I'm not sure she's feeling top of the world, but if anyone who knows Kat would know that even at 50%, she's 50% better than me. So you talked a little bit about the sort of fluidity of life right now, and some people wanting to come back, some people not. Do I kiss? Do I hug? Do I fist bump? Whatever. Do you think maybe life has become a little bit too fluid, and there's an imperative now to put some structure back into things?
I think a certain level of structure is important because you've got to define parameters for people so they know where they are and where they stand. But I think if you're drawn to PR and comms, I think you've got a certain innate adaptability anyway. I know it's something that's kind of innate in me. I love the variety. I love the fact I can be working on one kind of client 1 second and then dealing with crisis comms in another. So I do know I've had conversations with some of my colleagues in the day-to-day in terms of helping them to structure their day, you know, helping them to prioritize. A lot of them have actually felt that working from home, they are a lot more productive than they would have been in the office. I think we've all had our eyes opened actually about how much, just by dint of being around each other, we may have been slightly dragging on each other's time. Just because we enjoy being around each other, we enjoy the banter, we enjoy the chat, but you can also intrude on people when they're focusing. So I think there's a balance that's got to be found, and I think that is going to be slightly different for every business, because no two businesses are exactly the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ayẹni, you're, I mean, by definition, you have a fluid business model, and you've already talked about the need to continue to be courageous. How have you? Are you in a place now where actually you can see the need for structure, or are you just going to continue to embrace this fluidity?
Yeah, so I like what Kat said about if you're drawn towards PR and comms, there's this flexibility with how you do your work, because you can't predict what's going to come next, right? So when I started, I said a lot of things we didn't have the courage to do, and we should have done years before now at what we're doing now. So we've implemented, since March last year, we've implemented our full remote working policy. And what we find now actually is that for people who work in extremely busy cities, Lagos as an example, Lagos in Nigeria is a traffic ridden city, so to speak, So for employees who work from Lagos, it's in their absolute interest for us to continue to allow them to work remotely, because the time they save alone, on a daily basis by not going to the office is between 4 to 6 hours. What we've advised them to do is be in the office when you choose to be in the office. We also have a practice of working from client offices. So our consultants now have the broad option of working from their own homes, from working from client offices, or from working from the office, as suits them. What we are now trying to implement is to replicate that in other parts, like in Edinburgh, like in London. What I see that the future could be like, that I would consider a win, is that people can actually work completely flexibly and manage their time as suits them. The concept of waking up in the morning, rushing to get to the office, I think would change significantly. Also, the concept of traveling for an hour or two to go and see a client, you could have done over. So when you actually do physical meetings, say with a client, is because you just want to see them, because you want to share a cup of coffee, not because that meeting could have been done over Zoom. Most of our clients had conferencing equipment in their office for many years.
But never used it.
We were still traveling to their office. Yes. So I think that fluidity would depend on organizations and consultants. But for us, we think it helps us make better use of our employees' time, and it helps them actually spend that time doing the actual job. And it's going to get better and better.
I think we're all learning a little bit, aren't we? Yeah, I think it's interesting. I would imagine the word of March 2020 was pivot. I suspect the word of April 2021 is going to be hybrid. Everybody seems to be operating in some kind of hybrid environment. Nick, I just want to come to you. You already touched on the sort of work from home credits. Have there been any other sort of requests from employees that have been perhaps out of the box and you've had to consider, and have you had to put new kinds of operating systems and protocols in place?
It's a very interesting point, Paul. I think I've seen it from both the client side and the agency side. So agency world is doing tenders. We'll do 4 to 8 tenders a month, and they're very time heavy and detail heavy. And we've just had some lovely curveballs thrown in from HR departments about what is your COVID policy? Can you write it all down for us? And if we're going to if you're coming onto our premises, this is the protocols that you've got to adhere to and all of that. And the problem is the word that keeps coming out is this fluidity, and that's exactly where we're at. How can you write a COVID policy that changes on the news bulletin at 5 o'clock every night? So what you've written last week has changed. Don't mix, do mix, 2 meters, 1 meter plus, and all of it. So the difficulty is stopping ahead of that curve, because nobody knows what it is, and communicating that to your staff in a best practice way so they adhere to it. When you're in an iterative process all the time, reteaching them, retelling them what we said yesterday has changed to this now. And you do become, you're at risk of becoming a bumbling fool in their eyes because you're switching tracks so much.
Yeah.
So I've stopped watching those 5 o'clock news bulletins. I've got somebody else to watch them for me and just give me the bad news afterwards. And so because you get too emotionally charged with it, looking at
it. I mean, to be fair, mate, you're used to watching West Brom, so you're used to getting bad news every week, aren't you?
Getting even worse this season, isn't it?
I don't need help being a bumbling fool. I do that all by myself. We're just going to move on to the next subject, because I'm mindful that we've already smashed 25 minutes. Just on the final point though, do we now think that perhaps everybody's too accessible? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm probably on like 35 Zoom calls a week, right? Which means that actually the ability to get work done is now before 8:30 and after 6:30. Do you think actually, technology has made us all way too accessible and we're Zooming instead of calling, or actually have we stopped thinking, do I really need to have that conversation? Or do you see a benefit from that? Nick, what do you think?
I think you have to put a limit on the number of Zoom calls you actually do in a day, or Teams calls, or the mixture of the two, etc. Because what I was finding was you once you get past 8 or 9 calls a day, your physical time to actually get things done and do thinking time around projects gets pushed to the tired time of the day, 7, 8 o'clock of the night. And when you're in the home environment with kids, homeschooling and everything, the quality has got to be come under pressure, hasn't it, at that point? So we have spoken to everybody across our colleagues and have said 4 is the maximum in a day that we want to see you doing. And we do want you to be doing what we use the term contact reports, action reports, etc. We want those done after the meeting and not caught up of a night, because that's not doing you any good. And in terms of memory retention of what the call was all about, it's not going to be as accurate as what we would like. So we are trying to condense things and stop people overworking, which is a bizarre thing to say as an employer, because we were terrified from work from home that people would be just sitting in the sun terraces and going for walks with the dog and all of that. And the truth is they're working. I saw a report come out in the Times yesterday. The average employee is working 20% more hours working from home than they would in the office environment.
Absolutely.
So I think Ayẹni's spot on with the traveling to work and away from work, with that extra hour either side. But the employees are giving that back to the firm and saying, we're not traveling, so we'll work from our desk now and do it. Yeah, I think we've got a duty of care with our colleagues to make sure they're not overworking.
I agree. I'm just going to preempt with an apology. We operate in what's called the creative quarter, and it would appear that there's a pop band outside. So if you hear anything awful, apart from me, it'll be them. I'm just going to move on to the second topic, which is about how do we think we're going to communicate going forward. Now, obviously, there have been some enforced changes or challenges in marketing channel selection during lockdown. Clearly, out of home cinema, has been knocked about quite substantially. But beyond those obvious, David, have you seen any particular trends or changes in channel selection?
I think for us as a business, we are probably behind most colleagues who will be on this call in terms of our journey, our digital journey. So we had to shift quite rapidly. Initially we went to Zoom for everything, and then we went on to Microsoft Teams. I think Teams in particular improved significantly in that first 6 months of the pandemic year, which really supported us as a business, really. So we've been kind of rushing to make sure that everyone's got what they need to be able to work. And we've been testing lots of new systems, really. Testing and chucking away is what we've been doing, really. Trying to choose the best ones that work. So I suppose in many ways, it's probably been the golden age for these type of workplace support technologies. And I wonder if, in a couple of years, whether 2 or 3 of them will emerge as the real victors of this pandemic, and the rest will disappear.
But in terms of sort of client and customer marketing comms, certainly a lot of our clients have had to up their digital game. They've been perhaps too reliant on analog in the past. Have you seen a seismic shift in any way there?
Yeah, absolutely. So big increase basically from analog, really. But our business is reliant on some on-site activities. So those in-person meetings, those in-person communications activities have not stopped. It's just we've I suppose changed our investment and the proportion of time we spend on more traditional activities, you might call them, towards more newer ones. And that's kind of helpful because actually the data from those is a bit clearer. You get less of a feeling about how people are doing, what the pulse of the organization is, but you get a lot of metrics out of it, so it's quite useful.
Kat, I suspect, given your client base, you've had to be incredibly creative in channel selection over the course of the last year. How's that look for you?
Well, it just checking I'm not muted. Yep. In terms of comms, it's all about standout, right? So when we're talking to journalists and we're conducting media relations, the standard rules that have, I think, been applying for us for some time now have just become a lot more enhanced. You need to make your point quickly, you need to be punchy, you need to stand out in people's inboxes, particularly when you're dealing with journalists who are getting more emails than ever before, not fewer, and you can't ring them, you can't follow up, you can't chase, you can't, build those usual relationships. I think when it comes to the macro level of channel choice, I mean, obviously everybody kind of reacted immediately to, well, I can't advertise out of home, I can't advertise on cinema screens, they're all closed, I can't do this, what can I do? Well, everyone's working on digital, so of course digital saw a huge spike. I think if working in the media and marketing industries for as long as I have has probably taught me anything, it's that there's a couple of rules that tend to genuinely apply. It's digital has been growing and growing and growing exponentially for ages anyway, right? Because it's accessible, because it's targetable, because it's measurable in a way that so many of the other medias aren't. However, I have also seen that when everybody kind of flocks to one new hot medium, this is coming out now, everybody's launching a podcast, it creates opportunities and spaces to engage that maybe weren't there before with other options. So if you think, for example, cinema keeps coming up because it's close to my heart, but if you think that actually everybody's advertising on digital, what is the impact of doing something on a big screen in the dark when you're not multitasking and you're not looking at 6 other screens at once, you are just there to look at that? What is the impact of that going to be? And I think we'll probably start to see that ebb and flow of everybody going to the new, everybody going to digital because it is trackable, everybody, there's going to be elements of that's going to continue on, but it's going to create spaces to engage in other places. I also have a bit of a personal, I won't say bugbear because that sounds like I'm angry about it, but podcasts, I mean, they became a bit of a joke, actually. Some of them have, certainly the conversation on Twitter about, oh, everybody's got their own podcast now because it was a way to keep communicating. It was a way to broadcast. I am actively waiting for the day when a proper measurable approach to assessing how valuable a podcast is, what kind of listenership they get, how engaged they are, how regularly they tap into that. Do they just listen to that one, or do they listen to a spread comes through? And I think that is something that kind of broadcast medium, when you are essentially self-publishing, really needs to be able to build a long-term traction in the industry. Yeah,
and I think the challenge with broadcast, of course, is that it's essentially a monologue. And how do you create a collaboration and a communication when all you're doing is talking and not listening back? So interesting. The Ayẹni, if I can turn to you briefly on just to take Kat's point on, really, do you think that there's been an emergence of new technologies and new ways of working, but do you think some of the old ways of communicating will have died a death during this time?
Actually, Paul, I absolutely agree with Kat. You see, the so-called death of the status quo, the so-called death of these pre-COVID tools and techniques and channels, they've been greatly exaggerated. People, we are in an age where the kind of innovation that has happened in the past couple of years means that, unlike the pre-Facebook days, where you could see the regular death of channels that could have blown up, We're in an age now where it's highly unlikely that an Instagram or a Snapchat, or because what they're doing now is that they've realized that people no longer want to be talked to. People don't want to participate in, people don't like monologues. People want to be part of a conversation, and people don't just want to go and find out what's happening. They want to co-curate, right? What you find now is that these channels take Clubhouse. The Clubhouse concept is now on Twitter. It's going to end up on WhatsApp. It's going to end up everywhere. Similar to Stories, which was only on Snapchat at the point. Now it's on WhatsApp, it's on Facebook, it's everywhere. So what I think is going to happen is that there will be continuous innovation with the so-called traditional channels and tools and all of them. And then what I foresee is that platforms that you would not have expected to innovate in that way will now begin to. So, and I would think YouTube, I would think Google Docs, I would think Slack, I would think a couple of channels that you would not have imagined, right? I expect Gmail and co. So what I think is going to happen going forward is that the people who have your attention, be it for work or be it for play, are going to ask themselves, what more can we put here? What products, what features, and all of that. The guys who do it well are those who work in the sharing economy. Take Uber, where now they're just loading products and features on top. So for me, for the work that we do, we need to ask ourselves each time, how are behaviors changing? Why are those behaviors changing? And how can we use the understanding of both to determine what the future can look like, so that we're not playing catch up? What happens oftentimes is that we become experts in one, and then we are told, oh, there's now this tool called Clubhouse or called WhatsApp, and then we are running, and then we just keep running, as opposed to understanding consumer behavior, the what and the whys and the when, and being able to even advise our client. We told a couple of our clients a couple of months ago that that you need to be careful about how you think Clubhouse, because in the next couple of months, we expect Instagram and WhatsApp and Twitter and co to actually add that feature. And that's what has happened. So we literally stopped one client from going to make a huge investment. They go like, no, consider if you want to add Clubhouse as a new channel on top of what you're doing, but expect that if you are already big on Facebook or on Twitter, expect that this feature is going to come there. So if we're able to do that, we can use that to advise clients better. We can use that to then decide if one new funnel is needed, or if, as Kat said so appropriately, if we actually have enough data to say, okay, podcasts are now the in thing because of A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to find out years later, as has happened with Facebook, that we made mistakes because these guys marked their own script, and what we thought was A was actually not A.
Yeah. I think certainly I think, so many of us are guilty of kind of magpie behavior sometimes, and we just want the bright, shiny new things. And certainly, a big part of my role, as I see it, is encouraging everybody, as Ayẹni's just said, to think about, proposition and audience first and channel last. The amount of times I'm sure the agency folks will resonate with this. The amount of times I get sent a brief for a brochure without actually talking about what they're trying to achieve or who the audience is. And I'm not dissing marketing people, David, I promise. But we have to go back to thinking about what's in it for the audience rather than the new shiny channel. Nick, you're getting 8 tenders a month, so I'm going to have a little chat with you about that after this, because we're certainly not. In your,
I'll send them to you.
We don't do tenders, mate. We're too busy. In those tenders, quite apart from, are you socially distanced and have you got a COVID policy? Are you seeing any particular shifts, any particular trends emerging from those and from your existing clients as well?
I think the journey that we've been on for the last 12 months has been very interesting. Because what we saw in our client base was in lockdown 1, most of the companies that we dealt with went through their marketing departments and put them all on furlough and saw it as non-core activity, which as a marketeer we think is crazy. And your communications piece when you're closing depots or reducing hours or reducing services that you're actually offering to your customer base, is that if you're not communicating that to the consumer, you're causing yourself massive issues.
Yeah.
So we found the marketing departments were all furloughed. The finance directors had taken over the running of the business, and it was all about controlling cost. So the big branding exercises such as the TV, the out of home, cinema, etc., got stopped pretty much immediately, and the focus went to digital on our side, more because of the transparency of return on investment. If I'm spending £1, I can see I've got £3 coming back in. We will do that activity. But there was a real sense, and I don't know whether you've got this, Kat, across your client base or not. There's a sense of impatience with clients. They want a result immediately with stuff. You can put a chart in front of them and say, this is how a campaign will build, and you'll get the results out of this in 6 months, and next year you're going to have a halo effect out of it. They're not interested in that at the moment. It's very much, let's try 3 or 4 things, see what's worked, dump the 3 things that aren't working, push on with the one that is. And I don't know whether Kat's got anything different in her business. I haven't got a client with a 12-month or a 2-year plan or schedule in place at the moment. They're all built around 3-month activities, quarters. They call them sprints and scrums and things like this, but there is no long-term planning going on. And that falls into the hands of digital, really, because it's a very easy medium to actually get money away and spend it and see what the results are very, very quickly. So yeah. I can see why it's going that way. I don't think it's particularly healthy. I don't think it's giving the businesses the chance to own their own consumer bases and build their brands. It's a very reactive, give Google money, give me sales, please. But that's the nature of where we're at with this pandemic.
Yeah, and you can absolutely see the pressure piling on client side businesses, and I think we're fortunate that we've got a couple of drug delivery clients, so they're doing quite nicely, right? But certainly others, you can see there's like I've got to start demonstrating some real return real quick for us all to continue. I'm going to. By the way, I'm a little worried. We talked about we shouldn't be broadcasting, we should be listening, and we haven't had any questions yet, which either says we're answering all of your questions, or actually this is rubbish. So if you have got any questions for anyone, please do pop them into the Q&A. We're going to go to the final bit. We've got sort of 10 minutes or so. So we're going to go to room 101. I should get Nick to run this bit, really, because he's got the Frank Skinner accent. Yeah, I lost mine when I moved away from Wolverhampton. I haven't quite got it back yet. What are the things from this that we're going to take forward, and what are the things that we're going to consign to the marketing bin? I know David ceremoniously burnt his last tie the other day. And I know Nick is quite the opposite, actually. He wants to continue the sartorial elegance. So what are the things that we're going to consign to the bin, and what are the things we're going to keep? Nick, let's start with you.
I'm with the tie. I'm really not into ties. We can get those.
Oh, okay.
I think there's a whole sector in the automotive sector of car salespeople who would back you completely and say, let's get rid of ties and suits and all that. Why would you ever wear a suit now when you're actually physically not going to the client premises? And even if you do go to the client premises, you've got to sit 2 meters apart anyway. So I think that formality will disappear. I think there's a place for it. I think you might find that as the evening events open up, that there's a case of you dress to impress when you're going out of an evening, whether that's social or corporate or whatever you're doing. But I think in the workspace, it's going to be a lot more relaxed, and people, we've got the jogging bottom culture in the Birmingham office, and they go out for a power walk at lunchtime and got to get their steps in their health. And I think that's all really, really good. So ditch the formality, do the healthy bit, get the vitamins in that everybody's doing, and let's look after ourselves a little bit better. I think that's positive.
I mean, obviously I won't be wearing a suit because I can't fit into any of them. David, what about you? What are the things you want to consign to Marketing 101, and the things you're going to want to keep?
Yeah, well, apart from the tie, I think Nick, the point Nick made in the previous session was a really good one, because I think the turn to 3-month planning has been the case, I think, on the client side for the past 12 months or so. And, you know, there is, in defense of the client side sector, I've got to give that point of view, is that, you know, there has never been sort of more scrutiny of activities and making sure that you're delivering on things. So, you know, we were lucky in our business that, you know, we didn't hammer our marketing budget in terms of massively reducing it, whereas other businesses had to do that. But still, we did need to show a lot of deliverables. But, you know, the sooner we can return to sort of 12 months or 24 months of strategic view of what we actually want to achieve is going to be much better for the long-term health of our organization. And I think the other thing to mention is just the people side of things, because I'm of the opinion that people have never been as adaptable and flexible as they are at the moment. But we have to be a little bit careful to protect the cultural integrity of our organization, you know, making sure that we are, you know, giving our employees what they need and also what they want to an extent, but also making sure that we're getting what we want out of our employees and making sure we've got a cohesive organization. So there'll be some things we take and some things we actually stop doing. And we're probably going to have to do a stock take about that in a couple of months' time when we get to the sort of the next stage of this new normal where we are.
Yeah, we've run a couple of webinars around sort of type 2 thinking and actually why now is actually the great time to start to do strategic planning because you know all bets are off, right? So you know the type 1 stuff is the stuff we do every day because that's just our sort of the way our makeup and the way that we do behave. But actually now is a really great time to apply some of that type 2 thinking and stop and think and actually say all bets are off. Let's open our minds, be courageous, and go try doing some stuff that's never been done before. So I would certainly argue now is a sort of great time to do that. The people thing, you know, we're always going to come back to this because you know we are all people businesses fundamentally. Everybody I've spoken to and seen has responded incredibly well during this. Is there a point where actually everybody's just going to go, I'm done? And how do we manage that, do you think?
What do you mean by saying I'm done?
So you know the absolute exhaustion that I see certainly in some of my clients. They're absolutely shattered. They haven't had a holiday. They haven't had a break. They're on Zooms for 11 hours a day. At what point do you think that's going to hit, and how do we best manage that?
Well, this is where companies, and any company has to survey their staff, you know, has to get a sense of where they are as a business. You know, certainly in the UK, there is, I would say, quite a significant mental fatigue going on in the wider workforce at the moment. You know, people, I don't know if you've seen on most newspapers, the amount of holiday related stories must have tripled or quadrupled. People just desperate to get a holiday in the diary, you know, to have a break from work. And I think, you know, our employees have shown us a lot of adaptability, which, you know, as employees, we're very grateful for, but we do need to make sure that they are getting a mental break from the day-to-day activities, particularly, like you say, Paul, if we want them to get into the sort of more strategic space, where, you know, as PR agencies, you know, talking to me, you know, I want to be having those type of conversations, and you need to feel mentally refreshed to do that.
Absolutely. Ayẹni, let's turn to you. We've got sort of 5 minutes or so left, and I want to leave the last word with Kat, because Kat always has the last word in every conversation I have with her. Ayẹni, let's turn to you. We talked about around courage, and we talked around agility and flexibility. Are there any things that you want to consign to the bin?
I think that the only thing I can't wait to get rid of is the concept that a formal meeting now has to happen on Zoom or Teams. So we encourage our guys now, it could be a FaceTime call, it could be a WhatsApp call, it could be a voice call. The concept of everybody thinking once you book a meeting, you've got to send a Zoom link. I mean, it becomes work on its own again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we are encouraging our guys to make the meetings as informal, as flexible, and as infrequent as they can, so that it requires less preparation and it doesn't look formal and rigid, you know. But what we're taking away in terms of what we are, to use the word bullish about, is the fact that COVID gave us no option to innovate around a lot of things we should have done years before. So we're going into the future realizing that so many things we thought were difficult, were impossible, are actually possible because COVID showed us that's one. Also, I think David talked about prioritizing the mental health of workers. So what we did between March and now is we took a decision, and I'm grateful that we're fortunate enough to be able to do that, to say we will not ask anybody to leave. So we didn't have to follow anyone or ask anyone to go. And then we became very, very flexible with working. If you want a day off or two, please take it. And then we got therapists and just invested a lot around making sure that people got the right support, surveying them and finding out who needs help and all of that, So we won't stop that after COVID. That will now become an ongoing stuff that we think just make our guys do well.
Courage, compassion, and agility then. Okay. Katrina, to you, obviously you will have learned a whole lot in the last sort of 12 to 18 months. What are the things you're going to hold on to? What are the things you're going to lose? I'm assuming you've burnt all your ties.
Oh yeah, every single one of them. Yeah, first thing we did. Yeah. Well, I'll start out with another question. Are you familiar with the concept of the rhubarb triangle?
No.
There is a specific part in the UK. I think it's somewhere in Yorkshire. I believe it's near Harrogate, because of course it is. Where actually the bulk of the UK's rhubarb is grown, and they force it to grow, and it grows so quickly you can hear it growing.
Yes, I have seen that. Yep.
It's basically forced growth. I think that is what we have all been through over the last year. I think we've been forced to adapt. I think we've been forced to change. I think this is now the pace that life and business runs at. I don't think we're just going to fall back into old comfortable grooves. I don't think you take your foot off the accelerator pedal now. And that's something we're all going to have to adjust to, right? I agree with both what Nick said and David said about the balance between long-term brand thinking and short-term revenue generation. I think the balance has gone a little bit too far one way. And your brand that's your emotional pull, right? That's what actually has carried an awful lot of people through the last 12 months. So if you don't nurture that, and if you don't feed that, I do think the brands are going to start failing. And it's because too much of the focus is on let's just get the quick returns back in, even though there is a financial imperative there. And the final thing, I mean, the thing I love the fact that we can just talk to people at the drop of a hat, right? This is great. You can see people. It's not perfect, but you can see people. You can relate to people. I think what Ayẹni just said about being adaptive to client needs and how you can communicate and how you don't just fall back into the same, this is how we do things. We do a Zoom meeting. It has to be done this way. I think that's important. I think it is going to be vital for all of us when it comes to maintaining client relationships. I've had a couple of clients where I think around about the summer last year, where it looked like we were unlocking again, I started to say, God, it'd be nice to see you for lunch, just to have a catch up, just to, find out how you are, what's going on. And both of them actually that I spoke to about it said, why the hell would I want to do that? Mm-hmm. Not because it was us, but because there were, I don't want to come back into London. I don't want to do that. And I am very conscious that one of the things that creates standout in this industry is that personal relationship that you carve out with your clients. And I think through the filter of technology, that it becomes very easy to see one provider as very similar from another provider. And to me, all of these issues are kind of interconnected, right? It plays into your culture. It plays into how you manage your staff, how you talk about yourselves, the kind of services and the quality of what you offer. So that's what I've got my BDI on at the moment is how can we, in a landscape that keeps shifting under our feet, keep that core of our client relationships going so that we stand out and we keep offering that great service to them, which is based on the personal relationships.
Yeah, and to Ayẹni's point about compassion, I think our clients, certainly in my experience, our clients have lent on us heavily, as much emotionally as they have rationally, just to know that everything's kind of going to be okay. We have got a question in from Claire, who and I'm going to direct this to David because I guess he's got sort of the first direct experience of this. How and we touched on it a little bit earlier. How do you manage morale, particularly amongst sort of returning furlough staff versus the people who've been working all the way through and are probably feeling ever so slightly jaded right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question actually, because you can imagine some people who maybe continued working and would have liked to have been on furlough, and the reverse, probably some people who are on furlough would have liked to be working, particularly after a certain period of time, I assume. So I worked with our HR and learning and development departments just to come up with a bit of a plan about how we're going to engage with those people and get them back into the office and feeling good and feeling like part of the team again. There are specific challenges to do with people, and sometimes you forget that actually in the past 9-12 months of the pandemic, quite a lot has changed in the business, and if you've had people who just haven't been around, then they haven't been part of that change. They haven't been part of that cultural change. So they're coming back to something different, not only to an office with much less people, but you're trying to reintegrate them back into an organization and do it online instead of what they were doing before, having those in-person meetings. Yeah. So engaging with people from across the corporate parts of the organization, whether it's your HR people, those type of individuals in your business who are, I suppose, have the finger on the pulse of the culture, who knows how to reintegrate people. That's quite important to do that, and to make sure you've got a plan for integrating those people back in.
Yeah, and it's funny how I certainly have sort of found it quite difficult to remember how to interact personally with people as opposed to over a 9-inch screen. So I think I will consign one thing to Room 101. When we got people back in the office, the lovely Charlotte, who's looking at me now ever so scared, insisted that I turn Classic FM off and put Heart FM on. So I'm going to be consigning changing the radio to Room 101. It is just past 3 o'clock. I sincerely hope everybody has enjoyed this session. As I said at the beginning, these sessions are for you, and I sincerely hope you've got something out of it. I'd like to thank our panelists for putting up with my Paxman-like direct questions and taking the time out to do this. If you do have any views on the next session, what you'd like to see or hear, probably less of me, then please do drop me a note, paul.williamson@realia.co.